Shining is a beautifully made film, and it's a perfect example of visual storytelling, show, don't tell. This is why the film can be interpreted in so many different ways, and why it continues to get better with each viewing. Kubrick doesn't use any tricky camera work or techniques to accomplish this, however. One of the things that does stand out is his use of long 10, 20, and 30-second shots that force you to stay immersed in each scene. If you love The Shining as much as I do, you should watch a film called Session 9. It uses the same type of empty building atmosphere, slow burn tension, and long sweeping shot cinematography. It's a massively underrated and unknown film, and it's a shame more people haven't seen it. Maybe because it lacks the jump scares and monsters that we've grown accustomed to in modern horror cinema. But if The Shining is your type of movie, you will enjoy it just as much.
Hello, Gordon.
In part 1, we learned about Jack and his desire for freedom and alcohol, along with Danny psychologically torturing him to the point of a full nervous breakdown. I explained how the ghost of Delbert Grady was only Jack's fractured mind searching for a solution to his pain, and how red visually represents fun and freedom. When we first see Danny, he introduces us to Tony. Tony is his imaginary friend. This is the fake Tony, however, the Tony that Danny presents to his parents openly. When Danny is alone, he speaks to what he thinks is the real Tony. Many 6-year-old kids have imaginary friends to help cope with loneliness or traumatic experiences, and Tony first arrived when Jack accidentally broke Danny's arm. But what Danny thinks is a little boy that lives in his mouth and shows him things is simply the imagination of a lonely child with an extraordinary gift, unable to rationalize what it is or where it came from. Danny blames Tony for his powers because it's the only thing that makes sense to him. But Tony, just like Grady, isn't real. We learn a little about The Shining from Dick Halloran. He's the first person to explain to Danny that he's not the only one with powers. He's a man that's had The Shining for decades and is confused when Tony is mentioned. Dick Halloran had The Shining as a small child as well, so why didn't ghosts whisper things in his ear? Because there are no ghosts, just like there is no Tony. We do have to take into account that he's speaking to a child and can't be completely straightforward. He tells Danny that his powers allow him to see things, and that anything he sees in the hotel can't hurt him and isn't real. If there were harmful things in the hotel, why would a person that can see these things continue to live and work in a place where he was in constant danger? He says with a stern face to stay out of room 237, but why? We never see any of the supposed ghosts actually harm anyone. Danny claims that the woman in room 237 was the cause of his bruised neck and ripped sweater. How unreasonable is it for Danny to have had one of his seizures and snagged his collar on the edge of a dresser or a door handle during his fall? When we first see him talking to Tony, he passes out and Wendy has to call a doctor to come and check on him. Sudden loss of consciousness and seizures is a common thing with Danny. If we give his story any thought, one thing stands out immediately. How did a 6-year-old boy escape the grip of a ghost that was trying to harm him? If the woman in room 237 was strangling Danny to the point of bruising his neck and ripping his sweater, what prompted her to stop? Remember, Dick Halloran said that whatever Danny sees in the hotel can't hurt him.
Remember what Mr. Halloran said? It's just like pictures in a book, Danny. It isn't real.
So why can the ghost suddenly hurt Danny? We only see her when Jack enters the room after he was already told that he should expect to see a woman in there. A seductive nude woman in a hotel room seems like it came out of the mind of a 30-year-old man. In fact, no one in the film ever sees the same supposed ghosts. Jack sees Grady, the bartender, the party people, and the bathtub woman. Wendy sees the bear costume couple, skeletons in the lobby, and the bloody-faced butler. Danny only sees the twins, however. But didn't he see the woman in room 237? Well, we never see him and her together, and I doubt that a nude woman would be as enticing to Danny as it was to his father. Did she do her sexy curtain reveal as Danny watched with curiosity? We never actually hear Danny accuse the woman of his injuries either. He told Wendy that he saw something in room 237 and he had a bruise. Wendy came to the conclusion that what he saw was also responsible for the injury. Well, where would he have gotten the idea from if he didn't really see it? He got the idea from Wendy.
She's a confirmed ghost story and horror film addict.
Danny would be accustomed to seeing horror films and seeing the thoughts of his mother while she watched and read scary things. When the hotel manager first tells Jack about Grady killing himself and his family, He says,
It's still hard for me to believe it actually happened here.
if tragedy is rare in the hotel, where did all of these ghosts come from? Every terrible thing we see in the hotel is Danny's doing. He's projecting these images into the minds of his parents and is the reason that everything spirals out of control. Without alcohol to block Danny from entering his mind and being stuck in an isolated location, Jack has no escape from Danny's psychological torture. Well, what about the twins? We heard that Grady killed his 2 daughters in the hotel, and Danny is seeing their ghosts, right? This must be real because the story matches what Danny sees. That would be the correct answer if Danny hadn't already heard the story before he even arrived at the hotel. Remember, in the first interview scene when Jack was first told the story, Danny was listening to the story as well.
Do you think that'll get the job? He already did. He's gonna phone Wendy up in a few minutes to tell her.
The ability to hear things in other locations is a power that Danny shows later in the film too.
Whatever the explanation is, I think we have to get Danny out of here.
So here's what happened. Danny heard the story when it was being told to his dad, and as any normal 6-year-old would, he got scared while alone in a large empty hotel. His powers caused strong visual hallucinations like his father, and he simply brought the story that he heard to life. Another thing that I noticed was that each ghost says relevant things to the person that's seeing them.
There's hardly anybody to play with around here.
Come and play with us, Daddy.
Boy, I bet you we could really have a good party in this room, huh?
Great party, isn't it?
So what can Danny do? What exactly is The Shining? I'm only referencing the novels here because of the limited amount of information we have on the topic. In the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep, there's a group called the True Knot, and they all have different shine abilities. They're basically a group of nomadic psychics that steal the shine from others and use the energy to extend their lives. The members have various abilities like sensing the location of other shiners, draining others of their shine energy, forcing others to fall asleep, and becoming invisible through mental suggestion. We even see an adult Danny take over one of their minds and force them to commit suicide. So we know that the Shining is a generic term for a wide range of psychic abilities. But what powers do we actually see Danny use in the film? Clairvoyance, precognition, telekinesis, telepathy. This shows that Danny can mentally project images, messages, and feelings into the minds of others. So if Danny is responsible for all of the scary things we see in the film, how do I explain the man in the bear costume? Let's first use our eyes and you tell me if this looks more like a bear or like a bulldog. Pretty obvious to me, it looks like a dog. That isn't terribly important, but what is important is, if we're to understand this scene, we must look at what's happening with all of the characters at this point. Wendy recently avoided being axed to death and is searching for her son. She's confused and scared, and Danny can feel this. Danny is being chased by Jack and he can feel his pain and anger as well. In an attempt to comfort his mother, his child mind is trying to communicate in a way that an adult would understand. Remember, Danny can read thoughts and hear conversations in places far away from where he is. Being surrounded by nothing but adults the whole film, it's possible that he misunderstood an adult thought. A thought like enjoying Doggy Style. To a child, these terms will be wildly misunderstood. Think back to when you were 6 years old and what you would have pictured if you heard Doggy Style. I'm sure it wouldn't be the same thing that you would think of today. Maybe this is the thing that Wendy enjoys, or something that Danny heard many adults think before. So in an attempt to calm her during a stressful moment, he projects something that he assumes will put her at ease. And because his child mind doesn't understand, his mental projection is more terrifying and confusing than it is comforting. As Jack continues his chase, Danny grows more frightened and continues to try to project images to his mother. I think this scene proves, without a doubt, that the so-called ghosts we're seeing are just Danny's mental projections. At no point has this hotel been shut down long enough for it to reach this condition. How long would a building have to go uninterrupted for a lobby to look like this? Decades, I would imagine. So what is Wendy seeing here? What period of time is this supposed to be a representation of? Better yet, when did the elevators fill with liquid and spill out into the hallway? If we jump back for a moment to the man in the animal costume, ask yourself why this couple would be stuck in the hotel as ghosts. Was the sexual experience so powerful that it had to live on for eternity? Why are some of the ghosts in the hotel by choice, having fun and finding purpose, while others are forced to live in a permanent state of tragedy and horror? The answer is simple. There are no ghosts. It's all Danny's psychic projection. As Danny tries to push Wendy out of the hotel and to his rescue, he projects images that make the hotel unappealing. Skeletons in the lobby and the bloody-faced butler. But wasn't Grady the butler? The butler who has
Always been here.
So why isn't this his ghost? The bloody-faced butler is Jack's adult and restricted side. He has a drink in his hand and red liquid spilling from his head, as if he were bursting at the seams as the freedom begins to take over and cover the responsible side of him. This is the representation of Jack slowly killing his adult side. Danny can see the butler in Jack's mind because it's part of how Jack sees himself, stuck in a state of responsibility and servitude. But I've already explained the red liquid from the elevator and what red represents in our story. Again, there was never a time where gallons of blood spilled from an elevator. Last but not least is the final scene with Jack in the black and white photo. We never see Jack outside of the Overlook Hotel area. The first time we see him, he's just arrived at the hotel for his interview. To understand the photo, all you have to do is answer one question. What does Jack Torrance look like? What is his physical description? Do we ever see a picture or hear a description of him from anyone? Jack took the job at the hotel because he was anticipating the 5 months of isolation and freedom. Jack admits that he's seen Grady's photo in the newspaper before arriving at the hotel. There are pictures of many decades-gone parties of the hotel visitors throughout the hotel as well. What if I told you that Jack looked like this? Or this? After all, there's really no way to tell. Throughout the film, Jack is constantly shifting his expression as if he's wearing a mask, a face that isn't his. Now, I'm not saying that this is a physical mask, but if Jack was tired of being himself, fed up with the man that he had become, and craved a happy and free existence, he could have very easily adopted the outward appearance of someone else. The appearance of a man that's at the center of attention in what Jack considers to be a perfect existence. He arrived at the hotel, saw one of the photos, and internally adopted the physical appearance of a man that he wanted to be, the man that he could be for the next 5 months. We see him as this new persona, with a new face, as he slowly becomes happier and separates himself from the real Jack Torrance. So the photo is real. A man that was in the Overlook Hotel in 1921, possibly the caretaker. But what's not real is the face that we see our main character wear throughout the film. The Shining is about two things, and neither of them are ghosts or an evil hotel. The first is about a child with an extraordinary power that he doesn't fully understand and is invading the minds of his parents with images and emotions, pushing them over the edge of sanity. The second is a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown due to the pressures of adulthood and his own misunderstood powers. Without alcohol to dull the effects of the mental images invading his mind and nothing to keep his mind busy, the combination of circumstances eventually breaks him.